We are here for the sixth part. We are here for the sixth part in a series chronicling a journey through the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. This is a video through the 12th of February. And so I don't think that it is absolutely necessary to read the book along with this series, but what I am doing here is hoping to amplify the book as opposed to provide replacement for it. So, while and whereas I believe there are certainly things, I hope, there are certain things that you can get from this series, I do hope to amplify the text. So it is not necessary to have the text, but I think that it will prove more profitable to each individual reading the text along with this series. So there's two entries that I want to highlight for today's video, and I have my first point of contention really with the text. So February 9th is where I will agree with our authors and their selection of quotes. The quote itself comes from Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. February 9th is titled, "You Don't Have to Have an Opinion." And the quote from Marcus Aurelius reads as such: "We have the power to hold no opinion about a thing and to not let it upset our state of mind, for things have no natural power to shape our judgments." I think that this is very important, so I'm going to read it one more time here. "We have the power to hold no opinion about a thing, and to not let it upset our state of mind, for things have no natural power to shape our judgments," from Marcus Aurelius Meditations. And the quip from the authors here reads as such: "Here's a funny exercise. Think about all the upsetting things you don't know about. Stuff people might have said about you behind your back, mistakes you might have made that never come to your attention, things you dropped or lost without even realizing it. What's your reaction? You don't have one because you don't know about it." In other words, it is possible to hold no opinion about a negative thing. You just need to cultivate the power to you just need to cultivate that power instead of wielding it accidentally, especially when having an opinion is likely to make us aggravated. Practice the ability of having absolutely no thoughts or something about some. I'm struggling on the reading portion of the video today. Practice the ability of having absolutely no thoughts about something. Act as if you had no idea it ever occurred, or that you've never heard it before. Let it become irrelevant or non-existent to you. It'll be a lot less powerful this way. So that's one of the tenets of meditation, as meditation is sort of in the common vernacular, is the ability to have no thoughts at all. And what this does is it provides a certain degree of clarity in and of itself, because I think that there is something I refer to as emotional radiation, right? So when you go out in the sun and you get sunburned, even after you're out of the sun, your skin is reacting to the sun, negatively reacting to the sun. It is having a sort of meltdown from the effects of the sun. It is radiation. That radiation is tearing things down, whether the source of radiation is present or not. There is an emotional half-life in the way that there is a half-life for irradiation. And when someone is able to stop all emotion, stop all of those things that might be bothering them, and simply break ties with them, even for only a short amount of time, it's like putting on a lead vest. You break that line of radiation. Breaking that line of radiation allows one to refocus, to recenter, to reacquaint with the world at large. And the reason I think that this is such an important entry in today's world is it seems that we are in a socio-political environment that disallows this. We are in a socio-political environment that says, oh, here's an opinion, and you have to have one as well. In fact, probably you should have this opinion. You should have the very opinion that I, sitting here on your TV screen in an anchor's seat with a nice suit and tie, reading from a teleprompter, you should have the same opinion that I have because someone told me to have this opinion too. Don't you want it as well? This is, after all, the correct opinion to have. That's the world we live in, which means in this overarching environment, it is not just powerful on a personal level to be able to understand I don't have to have an opinion. It's not just powerful to the self. It is not just powerful personally. It's a superpower interpersonally. Because it's not just opinions, it's attentions. You have to pay attention to something to have an opinion. So absorbing someone else's opinion on something is, by proxy, just sort of downloading their attention. It is a replacement for your own attention. And sort of, I noted it as a superpower. Captain America Civil War. In the great big airport battle scene. I think that's where this is from. I haven't seen any of these movies in so long I might be completely fabricating the place where I'm getting this from, and probably I'm getting the dialogue wrong too, but there is a part where Hawkeye, Clint Barton, is fighting Black Panther, T'Challa. And Hawkeye says to him something along the lines of, "Hi, I'm Clint Barton." And Black Panther says, "I don't care." In that moment, Clint Barton did not care if T'Challa wanted a personal introduction. What he was doing was attempting to distract. If I take your attention over here, you might not whoop my ass, right? If I take your attention over here, it gives me a side through which I can come. That response, I don't care. I don't care. That is all powerful in that moment because it says, your strategy is bunk. I don't care. Now, obviously, this is just a wiffle waffle sort of example. This is nothing concrete. This isn't real world. But I think that is powerful, and I think that it is something that illustrates the point here on a different level, because pomp and circumstance are things which are just sort of relish to the meal of life. Pomp and circumstance, all of the things that came before a certain interaction, have no actual power on that interaction. So I'm getting a little bit into different tenets of Stoicism here, but it comes back to this core reason. Not caring, not giving the attention, necessitates the moment. Not having an opinion on something frees up a great deal of, is it RAM? Is that computers run on RAM? That's what makes everything go faster, the higher RAM? I don't. Pretend for my sake, okay? I'm a Luddite. I don't understand these phrases. Pretend for my sake that RAM, a higher RAM rate, ramrod, a RAM rate, is what makes a computer run smoothly. Clearing out all the cookies, clearing out, deleting all of the things in the trash bin of your computer, all of the unnecessary files/opinions, allows what is currently happening on your computer to run so much more smoothly. That is sort of a metaphor for life. Not having to have all of these separate opinions on things allows us the ability to more thoroughly deal with every moment. It allows us to necessitate the current moment. The current moment becoming necessitated because we are not cluttered with other moments allows a more true to the self interaction with whatever it is, whether that is a friendly interaction, whether that is a challenging interaction, whether that is something that is meant to absolutely destroy you. So this idea of not having an opinion on things that we don't have to have an opinion on trues up, makes more true each interaction in life. And we're in an attention economy. The world as we know it, with all the social media, with all of the TV screens, with all the computer screens in our lives, we are in an attention economy. And those vying for your resources, your attention, will absolutely leave you broke and move on to the next. Think about it. These video games, they're vying for your attention because the longer you spend on that platform, the more money they get, the more ability they have to show you someone else's advertisements. Something like that will leave you absolutely broke of your attention, will leave you absolutely empty-pocketed when it comes to those things which you might pay attention to, those things which you might positively affect in your own life. So in a world where violence used to be violence, we've come past that. Most places, most opportunities in life. We don't even have to incorporate violence in order to get our daily food. We just go to the supermarket. Violence used to be violence. Then violence became words. Now silence can be violence, which means along these lines, your ability to have zero opinion on something, your ability to not care, can be absolutely devastating to those parties who are vying for your attention. Your ability to say, I don't care, can be absolutely devastating to the strategies which the media, which politics, which all of those things, which are all of those parties trying to rob you of your attention are vying. It can be absolutely devastating to those parties. Your ability to say, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. Move on. Find someone else. Find someone else to charge of their attention. Find someone else to rob of their ability to concentrate. Moving on from this, the next page, February 10th, is titled Anger is Bad Fuel. Now, I didn't see this entry coming. So if you were here, I think it was just last week, if you were here for the video last week, you understand that I'm going to have some bit of conflict. If we're talking about conflict, if we're talking about violence, I'm going to have some type of violence towards the things which are mentioned in this entry from February 10th, Anger is Bad Fuel. This quote comes to us from Seneca on anger. There is no more stupefying thing than anger, nothing more bent on its own strength. If successful, none more arrogant. If foiled, none more insane. Since it's not driven back by weariness, even in defeat, when fortune removes its adversary, it turns its teeth on itself. This part I can agree with. I can agree with this part. There is nothing more stupefying than anger, and there is nothing more bent on its own strength. Both of those things sort of ring true when you think about them in your life. Well, in my life. Maybe I'm just a bit of an extra prick. But all of these things said by Seneca, I don't think necessitate the entry from our authors. The entry from our authors reads as such. As the Stoics have said many times, getting angry is almost... Once again, I am having trouble reading. As the Stoics have said many times, getting angry almost never solves anything. Usually, it makes things worse. We get upset, then the other person gets upset. Now, everyone is upset, and the problem is no closer to getting solved. Many successful people will try to tell you that anger is a powerful fuel in their lives. The desire to, quote, prove them all wrong, end quote, or, quote, shove it in their faces, end quote, has made many a millionaire. The anger at being called fat or stupid has created fine physical specimens and brilliant minds. The anger at being rejected has motivated many to carve their own path. But that's short-sighted. Such stories ignore the pollution produced as a side effect and the wear and tear it put on the engine. It ignores what happens when that initial anger runs out, and how now more and more must be generated to keep the machine going, until eventually the only source left is anger at oneself. Quote, hate is too great a burden to bear, end quote, Martin Luther King Jr. warned his fellow civil rights leaders in 1967, even though they had every reason to respond to hate with hate. The same is true for anger. In fact, it's true for most extreme emotions. They are toxic fuel. There's plenty of it out in the world, no question, but never worth the costs that come along with it. I could not disagree more wholeheartedly with the conclusion from Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman here. I think let's look at their opening paragraph here. As the Stoics have said many times, getting angry almost never solves anything. Usually, it makes things worse. We get upset, then the other person gets upset. Now everyone is upset, and the problem is no closer to getting solved. So, I would suggest that these are two separate points. Sure, anger almost never works because anger is like a fire hose. You have to point it. If you don't point the fire hose, you're just spraying water all over the place. You're not going to quench any fire. I think that appropriately dispensed anger is one of the most powerful emotions, and I'm not a Sith Lord, right? But the end of the paragraph insinuates that there is someone else on this problem-solving journey with you. Sure. If you're solving a problem with another person, anger is incredibly counterproductive, but many, and I would dare say most of the problems that we solve in life are solved on our own. Working on one's own, anger is one of the only tools to really get things started. Anger is like flicking the ignition to a car. You don't have to continue flicking that ignition. But if you don't flick the ignition in the first place, the car never goes. You can hit the gas pedal all you want without that engine going. Now, a lot is made in this entry about the fact that anger has has the effects of radiation as well. And maybe. But if, for example, one of the examples that is used here is someone getting in shape, using anger to get in shape, using the anger squeezed from the face of embarrassment at being called fat or whatever, in order to get in shape, Once you're in shape, it's a lot harder to come out of shape than it was to get into shape. Maybe not harder, because all you have to do is stop working out. But once you're in shape, your body continues a lot of that process on its own. The primary example being one of the main ways to get rid of fat is to burn muscle. To get rid of fat is to make muscle, is to build muscle. Why? Because once your body has that amount of muscle, it takes a higher upkeep of calories to maintain that muscle, which means if you add just a pound of muscle is not easy to build, but if you have a pound of muscle on you, that pound of muscle will burn so many more calories without you even having to do the work of changing your diet, right? So these things are self-perpetuating. Great works in one's own life, great feats of motivation and movement can be kickstarted by anger, and most times with most things, the effects are longer lasting in a positive manner than that hatred, that anger would have to be perpetuated itself. Another example near and dear to my heart is writing. Writing is not easy. If you have spent any time reading, so the term is thrown around, amateur writing. I'm not a great big fan of that term, but it is useful. I was part of many a writer group. I organized many writing groups in my day, enough to know that writing is not easy. I've read enough amateur writing to know the simple conveyance of action in someone's work, very difficult. But once the writer takes that criticism onto his or herself, becomes embarrassed at the fact that they wrote a terrible short story, and practices their craft, and beats on their craft, and sharpens their tools in fits of anger often. But at the end of such strenuous study, such strenuous practice, at the end of all of that, it is easier to write a simple action scene than having to work yourself up and get angry at it. You have now those tools that you forged in a furnace of anger, solitude and anger, solitude and rage. You have those tools readily available. You've got to practice by writing, but you don't have to get back to that place of being absolutely furious at yourself, absolutely embarrassed that you wrote a terrible story, something that was unreadable and unrecognizable to the English language. You don't have to get back to that place. You've created those tools for yourself. Most things in life, I think, work this way. Most things in life that an individual improves for themselves, that improvement is made through hours of solitude. So, what about sport? Take an example that seems completely contradictory to this. What about sport? Well, when we get the quote, many successful people will try to tell you that anger is a powerful fuel in their lives. Think of no one before you think of Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was constantly a Sith Lord, was constantly in that place where anger was a motivating factor. He said that he loved the fact he and Shaq were on a team, and they were absolutely terrible to each other, but they won a lot of games. Eventually, the cohesion got so bad, there were such miserable conflicts of ego that the team had to choose one of them. They chose to stick with Kobe. They sent Shaq off. Shaq ended up winning another championship, winning another ring before Kobe did. Kobe said he loved that Shaq won that ring without him. And he loved that Shaq won a ring without him before he won a ring without Shaq, because so many people came out of the woodwork and said, oh, you should have chosen the other guy. Oh, Kobe's overrated. Why am I making this point? I'm making this point because all of the practice that Kobe did, the sport itself is with other people. The practice, the diligence, the study, the working out, that is oftentimes alone. Something such as jiu-jitsu, right? Very popular these days. Jiu-jitsu, you don't have a teammate, but you have an opponent, and you have to have an opponent. There's two people going at jiu-jitsing. And sure, the practice is done with other people, but the discipline to improve at jiu-jitsu is not done on the mat. The discipline is waking up at 7 and getting your miles in, is the amount of water that you have to drink to continue having the energy to go to practice. It's all of these different things that someone does on their own. All of these monumental movements that people make towards improving their own life, I think oftentimes, if they do not begin with anger, which most times I dare say they do, there are moments of anger within them. And I disagree that anger is never useful. I disagree that it is never ultimately productive. I disagree that the radiation into your life, the half-life of anger, I disagree that the half-life of anger is more poisonous than it is constructive. But it has to be focused. That is all I have for this episode of the Daily Stoic. I hope to see you back here next week for episode 7.